In Beijing, Mr. Ansari had also meeting with the Chinese Premier, Mr. Li Keqiang. Both the leaders discussed issues of mutual interest. The Vice President also addressed the Indian community in China at a reception hosted by the Ambassador of India. Vice President appreciated their role and the progress they have made in China.
This is something that my wife and I have experienced in different corners of the world in the course of our travels. In far off, there is no place where you would not find an Indian community, a purposeful Indian community, a successful Indian community, a community which is contributing both to the functioning of the local societies and to its relations with India. And this is not surprising because every seventh person in the world, if I am right, happens to be an Indian. So from New Zealand to the west coast of the United States, from the points nearest the South Pole to the points nearest the North Pole and every spot in between, there would be an Indian, and an Indian who is doing good to the local communities and therefore upholding the name of India. And for this reason, I have not only to congratulate you for your own respective contributions, but I have also to thank you on behalf of the country, on behalf of the government, for the good work that you are doing and the helping hand you are giving to India and the government of India in creating a more cooperative world, a world in which India's profile is continuously rising, a world in which India and Indians are being increasingly welcomed.
A large number of Indians are also putting up in China and they have their own experiences about this place.
चाइना में हमको बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिलता है जो कि हमारे हिंदुस्तान में हम अभी भी उससे पीछे हैं, और यहाँ से सीख के हम वहाँ उसको अगर काम करें तो काफ़ी अच्छा फ़ायदा होगा उससे।
काफ़ी अच्छा अनुभव रहा है चाइना में इतने सालों में, और भारत और चाइना का ये इसी तरीके से दोस्ती का और ये बढ़ता रहे तो काफ़ी बिजनेस और इसके लिए बहुत अच्छा रहेगा इकोनॉमी के लिए।
चाइना के लिए अभी तक तो अनुभव एक्सट्रीमली अच्छे रहे, कभी कोई इशू नहीं होता है, सिक्योरिटी इज़ वेरी गुड, हम लोगों को कोई परेशानी नहीं होती है, कोई रेसिज्म नहीं है, बिजनेस एनवायरनमेंट इज़ गुड, सरकार की तरफ से कोई दखलंदाजी नहीं है।
Studies are good and we have better facilities than India obviously, but then the students are really good obviously, and the food problem is there. We feel homely here, definitely homely ज़्यादा feel होता है क्योंकि definitely इंडिया से आते हैं तो फिर like वो ज़्यादा डिफरेंस पता नहीं होता है।
यहाँ पे बहुत अच्छा रहा है, हमें बहुत सारे डिफरेंट कंट्रीज़ के लोगों से इंटरेक्ट करने को मिलता है और नया कल्चर है यहाँ पे जो देखने को मिलता है, तो काफ़ी अच्छा लगता है।
अगर आपकी चाइनीज़ अच्छी है तो आप सब कुछ कर सकते हैं यहाँ पे, चाइनीज़ अच्छी नहीं है तो यहाँ पे कुछ भी नहीं कर सकते। यहाँ पे लोग इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज नहीं बोलते हैं ज़्यादा, खाली चाइनीज़ ही बोलते हैं लोग ज़्यादा।
हमें तो बहुत अच्छा लगता है, एंजॉय भी करते हैं, बहुत न्यू कल्चर सीखने मिलता है, अपना कल्चर भी उनको दिखाते हैं, कुछ चीज़ें भी हम उनको दिखाते हैं। हमारे साथ हमारे चाइनीज़ जो भी क्लासमेट्स हैं वो भी बहुत ज़्यादा एंजॉय करते हैं।
Vice President had also delegation-level bilateral meeting with his Chinese counterpart Li Yuanchao in Beijing. Both the leaders discussed several issues of mutual importance, including border dispute and imbalance in bilateral trade. Minister of Commerce and Industry Nirmala Sitharaman, who also accompanied the Vice President, had a delegation-level meeting with her counterpart Gao Hucheng. Both the leaders discussed issues of trade imbalance and investment between the two countries. The bilateral trade between India and China declined from around $75 billion in 2011 to $65.45 billion last year, following a sharp fall in Indian exports to China. The trade deficit, according to officials, averaged to $35 billion in the last few years. The two countries had set a target of $100 billion by next year, which was an uphill task for India and China to achieve. After the delegation-level meetings, India and China signed 3 agreements in the fields of commerce, water resources and human resources development. These agreements were signed in the presence of Vice President Hamid Ansari and the Minister of Commerce, Nirmala Sitharaman. The first agreement was signed between Foreign Secretary Sujata Singh and Chinese Vice Minister, Ministry of Commerce, Gao Yan, which related to further expand the scope of bilateral trade and investment cooperation and promote cooperation between Chinese and Indian enterprises, including the development of industrial parks in India, so as to provide a platform for cluster-type development of the enterprises of both countries. The second agreement was signed by Ambassador of India, Ashok Kantha, and Vice Minister, Ministry of Water Resources, Louis Ning. The agreement pertains to implementation plan for the provision of hydrological information of Brahmaputra River in flood season by China to India. The third Memorandum of Understanding was signed again by the Ambassador of India, Mr. Ashok Kantha, and Executive of Vice President China Executive Leadership Academy, Pudong, Mr. Feng Jun. It pertains to communication and cooperation of training in the area of capacity building of public officials. Vice President was also presented a guard of honor by the Chinese government. The Vice President also delivered a lecture at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Beijing, on calibrated futurology, India, China and the world. In his address, Mr. Ansari said, "It is very rare in history that 2 large neighbors have become rising powers at the same time, and our destinies are linked by geography and history."
It is very rare in history that 2 large neighbors have become rising powers at the same time. Our destinies are linked by geography and history. We welcome China's peaceful development and regard it as a mutually reinforcing process. There is enough space in the world for the development of India and China, and the world needs the common development of both countries. As 2 large developing countries, our common interests far outweigh our differences. We admire China's achievements in terms of development and hope to see China become a developed country soon. Our relationship today has transcended bilateral scope and acquired regional, global, and strategic significance. We both view each other as partners for mutual benefit and not as rivals or competitors. It has been customary to focus on bilateral issues, although both our nations face similar global challenges today. The interdependence for dealing with these issues will only grow.
He further said that our primary interest is to pay attention to the task of development, and for it to succeed, both countries need a peaceful periphery and an environment of tranquility.
Primary interest is to pay attention to the task of development. For it to succeed, both countries need a peaceful periphery and an environment of tranquility. And thus, it has been the objective of both our countries to seek tranquility and stability in our immediate neighborhood and extended region. Only then can we bring prosperity and stability to Asia and the world. On the global stage, both our countries are at the forefront of the emergence of a more democratic global order and of multilateral approaches to resolving global issues in an equitable manner. The United Nations Security Council today no longer reflects reality and must be expanded.
Mr. Ansari said, in the years ahead, we see a trend of multipolarity emerging in the global political landscape and feel that India and China should cooperate for mutual benefit in this evolving and developing framework.
In the years ahead, we see a trend of multipolarity emerging in the global political landscape and feel that India and China should cooperate for mutual benefit in this evolving and developing framework. We are also seeing the gravity of world economy shifting towards Asia. Could the 21st century be an Asian century? For this to happen, India and China will have to play a decisive role and create a world based on good neighborliness and mutual prosperity rather than one based on the balance of power calculations and animosity.
Before leaving for New Delhi, the Vice President called on Chinese President Xi Jinping and discussed issues of mutual interest.
This visit of Vice President of India will go a long way in further strengthening the relations between two countries. It is hoped that both the nations will move together with mutual cooperation and peaceful coexistence on the basis of principles of PANCHSHEEL.